I thought that was the nicest thing that he could possibly have said, because it was true. If all things being considered, if I wasn't in a position to listen, I would listen to them, and they would be heard. So I stored that away, and we were in the second season of Scrubs, so Scrubs was really starting to take off. And when you're doing Scrubs, there's absolutely no time for anything else. Sure shit not writing a book. And so you just keep getting, for Cox, you get 2, 3-page single-space rants. You got to memorize, and we're going to shoot in a half an hour. So your mind has to be pretty clear. But I was intrigued by the talkative funny idea, and I thought about it. I thought about it a lot. I thought about it for about 6 months. And I was intrigued by the notion, and in no small way challenged and intimidated by the process of actually kind of dissecting this active listening that I've been practicing and honing pretty meticulously for about, 60 films and a Broadway play and 8 off-Broadway plays, and in real life, this active listening, what I was calling active listening. And after 6 months of thinking about the Talkative Funny, I called the publisher and I said, yes, starting the next hiatus, June, usually we break around June, I'd love to take a stab at it. And so I did. And I decided during that time, with not a whole lot of input from them, other than it was going to be a self-help book about listening, I decided what the Talkative Funny was going to be about. It was going to be a declaration of doing. It was going to be, when in doubt, do something about the situation you're in. I decided that I'd create a character, the Talkative Funny, who is, in fact, inside all of us, and that when he's unleashed or engaged, our capacity to actively listen is sharpened. And then, in no descending order, the book was about 4 or 5 other things. It was about training us to become more acutely aware of how your actions, you're checking a watch or whatever you're doing, how that affects the message that you haven't even verbally started yet. So an awareness of our actions. I wanted to also harness character traits that we all have, our sense of integrity, of grace, of resilience, and how that would predispose us to being available to receiving messages more clearly. And then the last part of the book is called The Impression You Make is the Impression You Create. And what I wanted the Talkative Funny to marshal was, I wanted him to insist that we take a reasonable responsibility for the messages that we broadcast loud and clear without saying a word. What are those? Anything from personal hygiene to body language, just a simple version is this one, to clothes and appearance, and of course, behavior. And for the purposes of tonight, I thought maybe we'd just take a tiny peek at active listening and what am I talking about with active listening. And I'll tell you that active listening for me is what we do when we're listening. It's I think when we're acutely aware and engaged in the message, the verbally communicated message that's being directed our way. And you've all done it a million times, everybody has. And I'll tell you the times you've damn sure done it. You've done it when you've anticipated and taken responsibility for the message in a good situation. One hypothetical might be when you have the first 5 numbers of the lottery and you're waiting for that 6th. You are damn sure engaged in the message. Every fiber in your being is on the message, how it's being communicated to you. You're there. You're doing something. You're anticipating. You're spending the money already. You're thinking about who you can help, but you're in the message. And then the converse of that is that we've all done it in unfortunate circumstances, or circumstances that we might anticipate yielding unfortunate. When we're at the hospital and he comes out and he tells us the blood count. When we're sitting there when our ankle is wrapped and the x-ray guy comes and tells us whether it's a sprain or whether it's a break. When the doctor comes in and says it's a boy or a girl, man, you're listening because you're doing something. So active listening is introducing verbs or doing something active while you're listening. Actors do it all the time on stage because hopefully if you're in a play and you're lucky enough for it to be a long run on Broadway or off-Broadway, you do 8 a week. That's what actors, it's a mantra on Broadway, 8 a week. You do 6 nights, you do 2 matinees. And so if we are watching an actor on stage and it's the guy who's listening, if he's not actively engaged in receiving that message because he's bored or he's thinking about, who cares? But what he's not thinking about is the message, the verbally communicated message he's getting. Well, if he's bored, we're going to be bored and the play will close. So what actors have to bring on stage is a sense of doing something while they're listening. And it's the only way that actors can survive a long run and keep it fresh. Because if they don't, the play will close. What are they doing? They're bringing verbs on stage. And so in the book, there's untalkative active listening ammo, and there'll be a laminated index card that you'll have to be able to bring with you. And they're really just verbs. There's nothing that any of you are not familiar with. So if an actor's on stage and that night he decided while he's listening he's going to admire the message or understand or unleash or adopt the message, he's doing something. And what I'd suggest to you in the book is that by doing something while you're listening, you'll listen 5% better. That's all. But 5% for most of us is 100% better than we've listened our whole life. And the way that would profoundly impact your love life, the way you talk to her, the way she talks to you, the way you talk to the boss, the way you take his information in. 5% is 100%. When we're not listening actively, which is what most of us do all the time, in the context of the untalkative funny, we're passively listening. And passively listening is when we're dreaming, when we're listening to somebody, which leads to hallucinating, which leads to head pounding, which usually means we're preoccupied with something. And then finally, something active happens. We're thrilled to be able to leave. And so our exit trumps the whole message that we were just receiving. Because we finally did something active. God Almighty, if you've been thrilled by the message, which you have to take responsibility for in the context of active listening, because sometimes our teachers and the boss, they're not responsible for communicating their message. They should be, but they're not. We're supposed to get their message however they're going to give it to us. And so when we're trapped in passive listening, it means we're not doing anything.